His know-how is not really technology. Technology is machines, those things, but know-how comes from not only one person. Today's know-how is, they argue that societies, countries, if you look at 50, 60 years ago, the poorest country and there, know-how. The countries as a whole had know-how. So we should develop this within ourselves. And for that, we should have migration. We should allow experts to come in. Some of these IT businesses needs experts. If you start doing it yourself, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of money. So that's one aspect that you should do, and we should allow. I think we did it marvelously. Maldives did marvelously with respect to tourism, and they allow experts to come in, they allow managers to come in. So cooks, different chefs to come in to do different type of plates. So everything is putting together to develop that industry as a whole. So that migration is a very important thing, and most of us, our countries don't have easy migrations. People don't come here. If you take India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, very difficult to come, but ease of coming to come and do transfer the know-how is a very important aspect. So I am not going to touch too much on human resources, but ultimately what we want is technology transfer. Infrastructure development, we talked about incubators, very important. Indians are experts on this. If you look at Bombay Stock Exchange, I happen to be going to there because of my SAFE, South Asia Federation of Exchanges chairmanship. I went there. Bombay Stock Exchange has two, nothing to do with the startups. They are listing companies at a different stage. But Bombay Stock Exchange has 2 floors of incubator. And they allow 3D printing, they give you 3D printing to models, they are giving various IT facilities, they give you telephones that are given, and a lot of facilities for you to start your business. So this is very important for business to take off. Incubator system is very important thing to do. Incentives, sometimes they talk due to taxation or maybe land matters, these act as an extreme disincentive at taxation. Most of the businesses today, especially in some countries, they like to avoid taxation. They really hate paying taxes. Maybe because they have no confidence that their taxes will be used for proper purpose, or they are based on avoiding taxes also. And it gives them a completely disadvantage that you are paying a tax. So as a result, they like to avoid taxation. The results are very severe. I'll talk to you about when it comes to private equity and things, what is happening with taxation. But on the other, so taxation should be, there's no reason why it's a fashion now in this SAARC region especially to tax mobile phones. Do as much as, because it's very easy to collect. Tax as much as possible banks. Now when that happens, it's very easy to collect from banks and mobile phone operators. But these are positive externalities. In industries where there are positive externalities, you shouldn't tax too much. You should actually tax negative externalities. But we are in the other way around. So taxation should be incentive for people to start SMEs, go forward, become bigger, and minimize bureaucracy. I think that also we talked about. A lot of us, so I'm not going to talk too much. But these are doing business, the stock here, very nice. We have to go up and up possible, but minimize the bureaucracy. It's a must for private sector to thrive. And financing private sector is one area that I'm sure you would like to hear. Equity and debt. Is that both has to be present in a country for the private sector to thrive. Initial capital is usually, when I heard talking when the new businesses are started, first capital comes from you and your relatives or friends. Then it should move up. Before accessing external financing, so we should have a very good business plan to cover 5 years. And there are a lot of help that can come to SME sector to develop this business plan. And it's not really a feasibility study or it's not really a nice report that is done, but it is more than that. It should be committed strategies and how you can move forward for 5 years. That should be very So the company should be encouraged to look for management. One of the basic problems SME sector in my experience faces is that they can't get out of it. The sponsors cannot get out kindly. They like to do things for a long time. This is the business I started, why should I get out of it? I'm the one who started, I know how to run this one. But ultimately, a lot of firms who have become big found that their sponsor is the main liability. I had one experience where I was asked to do a diagnosis study on a company, and I came back and said, there's one problem here, sponsor. So his professional managers, he should bring in various controls and various like budgeting, various other controls. So that is a must to bring in, and you should slowly get out of the business to. And the next problem that will face up in this part of the world is next generation. Where should you keep your next generation? If your son is coming from abroad, well qualified, where should we keep him? Most of us will say he should be the managing director, next managing director. But I have one firm who I worked with very closely. He said, son, this investment is what values to you. This company is what values to you. This is my wealth. It will pass on to you. But don't expect career from here unless you perform. So either you should look after your investment or look after your career. So he said, please look after your investment, come from the bottom, go to the top, and he's now managing director. But he started with as a management trainee there, brought up to a level where he can ultimately take up management director job, and he's preserved his investment. Most of the time what will happen is they bring in this son or daughter into the company, and that results in company losing value. So ultimately investment is lost to the son or daughter. Equity financing, we talked about the various product life cycle, different stages in a holistic approach to development of private sector. You should have to have financing available. Initially seed capital comes from your own operation, but thereafter it should be taken over by various arrangements, institutional arrangements to fund the business throughout. So for that we need a needs vibrant share market. I think I know a little bit about Maldives share market. I think we have to do a lot to few things. One is foreign investments should come here. We should support them. We should not. Second is that there should be more and more listings happening, not for the sake of listing, but it is actually for needs of capital and need of why you should go to share market is to in search of capital, not to do anything else. So that has to come in to the business. More and more hotel sector, more businesses should start listing here, and foreign participation should be is a must. There was one thing I did agree with is that SDFC said that they can go for businesses with 5% equity or 20% equity. But I think equity 5% is going to have problems. If you don't put in sponsors equity 5%, I am perfectly okay. But you need outside equity. That feature of equity has to be there to up to about 30, 40, 50%. Otherwise, businesses won't survive. But if you put more and more debt instead of equity, then it will result in risk to the company, because equity has this very peculiar feature that you should pay it in time. And the banks are facing huge problems because of Basel III coming in, and they have to pay if you don't recover it, you have to start providing for that. And banks are in trouble if you don't provide. So the both sides, equity is a must, otherwise it will have huge risk that will come into the company. Of course, if it is infrastructure project where there is concessions from the government, you can think about going for a very high loan portion. But if it is agriculture project or where there is a new startup, you shouldn't go for too much of debt, and that will bring in risk to the company. So what you have to do is actually go for equity. Now, if you don't go for external equity, what will happen is the red line. Red line is where the company is malnutrition. company cannot live up to its potential. Now, if you don't have equity, companies survive, no problem. They will use their internal cash generation, and whenever they will not take dividend out, they will put as much as possible money into the company, but there's limitation. Without equity, you can't raise huge amount of debt because it's risky, and the company will start going through a malnutrition path. But if you put in external equity, if you put in external equity at the right time, the company will have a growth path that is much more high than the red line. So, this is where external equity should come in. Companies will start living up to its potential only if you can go to that blue line. If you are in the red line, of course, business is doing well. You may think it is doing well, but external when external equity come in, it will start going to the other path. Another problem, I said taxation can be a problem here. We started a first private equity fund and only private equity fund in Sri Lanka. That private equity fund, we find one of the major difficulties. We say you have to be transparent, you have to prepare your accounts properly, you have to pay your taxes. Now the problem is the sponsor has a problem. Either follow the red path and not to pay taxes, or in his mind he is getting higher value because he is not paying taxes, and taxes are high in Sri Lanka, or combine with the private equity guy and start paying taxes. So his mind maybe he is thinking, I may be getting higher value to myself, not to the others, and live in that curve, not to pay taxes. So that's a decision that lot of private guys has to take place when taxation are very crooked, and it's value destroying type of taxation come into the scene. This is like very high VAT. VAT has to be paid. If the turnover is below certain amount, you need not pay VAT. Now, if that is the case, better to be malnutrition than being on the blue line, because you have to pay 15%. So, my message is banks cannot, there was a time when a lot of banks can fulfill, there were banks, some special species called development banks. DBS, Development Bank of Singapore, is DBS now. ICICI Bank is industrial commerce and it's a development bank. ICICI Bank, one of the largest in NDB Bank and DFCC Bank were in Sri Lanka also development banks, but that species is now slowly moving out. But so you have banks cannot do everything a SME can do, because they have Basel III coming in. There's a lot of provisions has to be made. Equity, if you start giving equity from a bank, they will start not making much of profit, because you have to provide equity. The day one, they have to provide their equity for equity investments. So what you have to think about is banks cannot do it. So there should be other institutional arrangement that we should. I'm sure pension fund will have a problem now, because everybody will want them to participate. Yes, I don't think, yes, it's a very good idea for them to participate in private equity. I will talk about it a little bit, but they are not the only source. There should be other sources coming in. When we started our one, it was IFC, DEG, FMO, and there were some foreign parties. We ourselves participated in NDB, participated $12 million US. That's how we started a $44 million US fund. Good, very good source of investment is the pension fund, but I don't think a pension fund can be the only private equity firm. There should be institutions coming in, various institutions who can join in with pension fund to do long-term investments. First one is venture capital, ideas. Now I heard the entrepreneur saying ideas cannot be funded here. Yes, ideas can be funded only if you have that type of investors, idea investments. 9 out of 10 have trouble. There's only one who will succeed, and that one will pay you for everything. So venture capital is not an easy business. You have to have a lot of understanding, entrepreneurship within yourself to understand what this idea is and to move with it. And I'm a banker, so I can tell you this. I started my life as a banker. Don't allow banks to participate too much into venture capital side. They can't do it. Please don't do it, because you need special training for this. You need to have partners for this. banks are used to credit which are within 1 year they have to recover. And the panic they get in from when a company goes bad is outside. You can't think about what happened to bankers when they see a company going bad. But venture capital, they are part of the game. They will try to help them, they will try to put more money. Bankers will never put money when the company is in trouble. So I don't think venture capital business can be started. Sri Lanka is started by banks. First round of venture capital started by banks and finance companies. They couldn't stand this. So I don't think you should do that same mistakes here. It should be some different, or bankers can be trained. I'm not saying that since I'm also a banker, I got training for knowing what this is, but you need a training, you need a different orientation to appreciate what is venture capital. Other one is private equity. Now, I have some experience in doing private equity, and again, I thought I have done equity, I have done fund management, I have done banking, I thought I know private equity. But I think it was actually IFC who called me and said, you can't do this, get a foreign partner. I think that is a very big, good advice. I still very grateful for IFC for doing that, calling me and saying, you can't do this. You think that you can, but fund management is different, because fund manager look at 3 years. And that is completely different to what a private equity guy will look at. They look at much more long term. So private equity, another very important aspect in venture capital as well as private equity is the exit route. There are 3 exit routes. One is IPO, so you have to have a good capital market. 2 is the trade sale. Actually, the most important one is trade sale. The software businesses that they are producing, the exit can be a very good trade sale for somebody who will integrate it with the whole package, and that's where the money is. That's how, it's not IPOs that brought a lot of money to IT businesses. Yes, Facebooks and they came through IPOs, but most of the businesses, smaller businesses, they sold it to a bigger one, and with that only the real money came. So, so trade sale is the one. Other one is sponsor buying it over, which is not so reliable. So there should be exit route, otherwise nobody will come. Private equity and venture capital will come only if there is an exit route. And private equity and venture capital also introduces a very important aspect to the business discipline. Getting out of the mentality of, I am the one who developed it, I know how to do it, don't come to me to advise me on governance. That private equity, when they come in, they will graduate you slowly. Ultimately, you are ready to go for IPO or trade sale. So that is a very important aspect of private equity and venture capital coming to you and joining you. Almost all the very valuable companies in US came with venture capital, private equity, then IPO. So that is, take that as a norm. Without that, just IPO is not enough. Because to go to IPO, it takes time. By that time, you are malnutrition. Then you are following the red line and trying to go IPO. But if you can go to blue line and go for IPO, then value is more. Mezzanine financing, I think we are talking about private placements. Again, private placements, people will come only at a dynamic, very vibrant stock market. Without that, you can't come. What can you do when you invest in private equity and private placement and wait forever? So usually they want to get to a capital gain through IPO or trade sale. So without that one, they won't come. The IPO, that really needs good capital market, and it's, I think, encouraging thing is, I don't know whether you know that my firm got involved with Orido IPO here, and they are doing another one very soon. So it's expanding, the market is expanding, but that is very encouraging. So I think we should try to get that foreign element also here. Orido would have been ideal one because it has a brand, it has an international brand. So we could have asked some foreigners to come in. You can use that. Foreigners won't come for very small IPOs. They will go for only for bigger ones with some international branding. Orido is very well known for the IPO, so we could have done nice foreign placements also part of it. And that can attract foreign funds. Once they come in, they will look at Maldives as an important investment destination. And secondary issues and right issues is the last one. Now debt, also there should be disintimidated instruments. Why is disintimidation very important? You get rid of the bank from the whole picture. You get rid of usually what is happening is depositors come, banks keep a margin, banks has to keep reserves, banks has to keep a lot of administration costs, and then they have to loan it out and get a return for it. And that margin can be reduced and divided between the investor and the company if you can get rid of it. So that the way to get rid of is capital market. Bonds, sukuks, and commercial papers in the short run, all are meant to disintimidation. So cost of borrowing will come down drastically if you can disintimidate. But for that you have to first build up a good business. You can't just do a small small business and go to market, but you have to be a medium or large business to go to market and try to do this type of instruments. And other one is bank loans, you all know, but it's a very great idea to have a SME bank. I'm not taking out, that's the way to show you prioritize the SME sector, but there also we should be very, very careful that we have to see that SME sector is not really a traditional sector. Their needs are different, their working capital needs are different, their loans are different, their growth patterns are different, they may be seasonal, so everything has to be looked into before giving working capital loans, and there should be much more entrepreneurship in that credit evaluation also compared to a traditional loan that is given to a large organization. So SME, great idea, you should do it, but we should make sure that it is really SMEs needs are met. That if you don't do it, if you go to traditional method, and some countries actually did it, and ultimately they will become just another bank, profit making, huge margin, that type of business. And the government also should support it by giving some credit lines, cheaper funds for them to build up SME sector. And so that's my presentation. So overall, I should say that in conclusion, private sector cannot be developed in isolation. It should be developed taking a holistic approach, and capital market has to be developed, institution has to be developed before, I think, capital market institution. Private equity is different to venture capital. Venture capital is different to secondary investments. It's even more different, banks are different. So all institutions should work together to bring this private sector to a dynamic nature. If you take all the tiger countries or East Asian countries, they develop their institutional setup to with the capital market to make this happen. And even Germany, Japan, if you take, and also linking with the big companies. Japan is very good in that. Germany was superbly doing it. They linked the SME with the bigger companies. So the SME market is assured. Toyota has a Toyota village, because that's because they are supplying to Toyota. So if you can get hold of, now we did a business, it's difficult to do it, very difficult to do it, but I'm not telling you to do that one. Set up for hotels, 5-star hotels mainly, and 3-star type of businesses, centralized laundry. Very new equipment we bought in, and it's one of our private equity investments. So it is actually catering to the business. After this incident, I don't know where the tourism will go now from yesterday, but actually when the tourism is building up, this centralized laundry is extremely valuable, because the water pollution, water treatment, everything can be done at central location. So water can be taken from a river. So most of things can be done separately for a laundry. But if you have a laundry in the hotel itself, then you have to do it inside the hotel. And these hotels have got a huge opportunity cost for the space. So they really wanted, now they can do a some recreation facility there for tourists. Why a laundry? Nobody will enjoy seeing a laundry there. So if you can have a reliable source of laundries, that's something that we did in Sri Lanka. But my first call yesterday was to, today was to what will happen to that place when tourism come down because of these problems. Yes, a lot of big hotels started giving them the business. So like that, it's a low capital. Hotels are hugely capitalized. Hotels are very big, but it's a low capital, centralized business that can be scaled up. Scaling up is also extremely important. So there can be a lot of interesting businesses happening. I hope we will hear a lot of success stories from here and when you move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vajira Kulatilaka. We have a panel discussion coming up this afternoon. Discussion topic and panelist information is available on our mobile app and Finance Forum website. You can direct your questions to the panelists through online chat. And also I would like to remind all the participants to send us feedback on our mobile app to be a part of our lucky draw. To send feedback, please go to events, then select Finance Forum 2019 and please give your feedback. We will announce the winners later today. Next on the agenda is a joint presentation by the Capital Market Development Authority and the Maldives Stock Exchange on private placement market by Mr. Mohammad Ishraq Faisal from Capital Market Development Authority and Mr. Ibrahim Haitham from the Maldives Stock Exchange. First, I would like to invite Mr. Mohammad Ishraq Faisal from the Capital Market Development Authority on stage.
Introducing Private Placement Market, a new capital market access to finance solution. Different from conventional capital market mechanisms, accessible to all companies, option to issue different debt-based instruments, offering an organized market to do private placements, operated on an e-platform. Choose your investors according to your preference and approach with a CMDA-approved prospectus, opportunity to build a reliable investor base for your subsequent investments, opportunity to gain investor confidence through enhanced performance and transparency, an organized market to channel your funds to business investments and to generate better returns, private placement market because we envision a viable and a competitive access to finance alternative.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good afternoon, everyone. I am Mohammad Ishraq Faisal from Capital Market Development Authority. I'll be talking about the private placement framework. CMDA is not just a regulatory institution. We are not purely like a securities commission. We have a very important mandate to actually develop the capital market of the Maldives. So we have been in continual dialogue with the stakeholders, especially policymakers and businesses and other stakeholders like market participants to identify the problems, why people aren't coming into our market. And we have identified some of the most important issues. I think for some of you, these would look like just common sense, but I would still go through them. Bank financing. So this is the most common method used in Maldives. Financing limits are there because quotas cannot, a single business, they will not invest in a single business too much. So, and high collateral requirements, own equity requirements, repayment period, rates, and most importantly, lack of competition. So all the other factors are problematic because there is no competition to banks. It's like a natural monopoly. So the competition to the banking is naturally the capital market. So we are the competition, but our capital market isn't that developed yet. So this is what happens. And the capital market is usually reserved only for the larger companies. SMEs find it difficult to access, but still they can require changes to company structure like converting to a PLC and resulting alterations like you would need 10 shareholders, 5 directors, and lots of regulatory requirements. Lack of understanding and technical know-how. people think that the capital market is neuroscience, but it's not actually. It's like we like to give fancy names to lots of things, simple things, and you will see later. And then a lack of infrastructure, because we are a geographically diverse country, and to access the capital market up until recently, people had to come to Male. So this is also one of the main issues. And then private placements, all the businesses are currently prefer private placements. Difficult to find suitable investors, cannot advertise to the public because it's not allowed, not regulated, thus relatively more risky, lowered investor trust, leads to additional costs. So if investors aren't trusting you, they will demand more. They will demand high collateral, they would demand higher rates, and this is not viable for some. And then there are venture capitalists, angel investors, crowdfunding platforms. These aren't readily available. Crowdfunding is recently, I think, being implemented in Maldives in the concept stages, not investment, but charitable donations. I'm sure you all have heard about Wagutu Ehi and Sankulun. I think it works fairly well. So, one more. Our management, our CEO, with her wisdom, decided, brainstormed, right? The senior management was brainstorming and said, let's combine capital. Why not combine capital market and private placement? Because we can use the advantages of both and minimize the disadvantages of both using each other to leverage. So we came up with the private placement framework. Provide a regulatory oversight, minimal marginal regulations, disclosures and governance standards for issuances on the platform, all companies that meet a minimum criteria. And by minimum criteria, it is really minimum, so SMEs don't have to worry too much. Will be allowed to pitch their financing proposals to a pool of private investors on an electronic platform. Formalized process, there will be a market mechanism with platform track records and added transparency would mean more investor confidence and may lead to reduced costs, like investors might not demand credit rating or higher collateral, as I explained before. Flexibility to remain a private entity and issue securities to raise finance without converting to a PLC. So most of our businesses, I have personally seen, they really don't want to turn into a PLC. I don't know why, but they don't want to do that, so they have the option. So you will not need 10 shareholders, no need for the director limits, the requirements. And easy and efficient information sharing and issue process via the electronic platform. So where buyers and sellers can meet and advertise products. So there is an advertisement marketing. You will have the ability to market to a target audience. So flexibility to choose investors, increasing chances of having investors with similar objectives, means to advise and assist your company to provide funding various stages of your business cycle. Like if an investor invests for the first time in your company, so this person will have skin in your game actually. So they would be interested in subsequent financing because they will want you to succeed, right? So you have that. Easier compliance standards, cherry on the top for you. Off-market trades are allowed, introduce innovative product structures, option for disclosures to be made only to investors, not the general public, no need for AGMs, no need to publish your quarterlies, annual reports or audited financials, and not the public in general, only within the period of issue and only up until the maturity of your instrument. So yeah, neuroscience. This is actually very simple. See, collateralized debt obligations, this is just a fancy name. It's very simple actually. Let's say SMEs want to raise finance. They can directly issue bonds and sukuk on the platform and pitch directly to the investors. An investor can be the pension fund if the regulatory framework permits. And I have always thought that SMEs, previous presentations talked about pension fund investing directly to the SMEs. In my personal opinion, that's not a good idea. I think there should be a market mechanism for this to happen in a transparent way. So SMEs can directly issue bonds and sukuk on the electronic platform, and the pension fund or any other institutional investors, they can invest through the market platform. So the prices and everything are Hello? So as you can see, SMEs can also use the SME bank to get loans. And let's say SME bank has 100 million rupiah. And 100 million rupiah worth they gave to the SMEs, so now they are empty. They don't have any money. But they do have the portfolio of loans which will generate returns. So they can just collateralize that. These are securitized by collateral. So these can be converted into bonds and issued on the electronic platform. So they will get another 100 million or 90 million, which can again be used to finance SMEs. So this you can leverage, you can continually go on funding the SMEs. Same with the other banks, mortgage loans, real estate, all these, their portfolios can be converted into a bond and they can get instant liquidity. So they can issue more loans. So this is actually something Maldives actually needs. Yeah. Okay, I hope I have been clear. So the objectives CMDA wants to do wants to achieve: enable easy access to finance for all companies, especially SMEs. We want you to come. We encourage you to come. We are not a regulatory authority purely. We want to develop the market, and we have a very nurturing approach. You can come, contact us anytime. We welcome it, and we look forward to it. Create more market-based investment opportunities, as you can see on the previous slide, as you saw. Increase participation of institutional and private investors in the securities market. Encourage banks to participate as intermediaries, especially dealers and investment banking and market makers, because our secondary market needs liquidity. So we need a market maker, a bank with the infrastructure, and especially investment bankers. Our national bank needs to come up, because how long will our companies rely on foreign banks to do investment banking related services, to do IPOs? No, we need our banks with interest of our country. And look at our sovereign bond, which was Chinese lead arranger. Chinese bank was the lead arranger. There was double demand, but our rates were high. In my opinion, that wasn't very, I don't think it was a good rate we got. But instead, if our own banks did this, I think we would have got a much better rates. We would have been better off. Encourage entry of new market participants such as credit rating firms, investment funds, and advisors, financial advisors. Increase market liquidity, and especially because we need banks to participate because of their infrastructure. Our market is geographically diverse, and they have branches in almost all islands. So this will also boost our market. Boost competition in the market and accelerate business activities in the economy. As I said in the first slide, we need competition to the banks. Raise financial awareness and improve investment savings culture. That's also something. And anything I might have said, that is all in my own opinion, so not part of CMDA's view. Yeah. And I would like to invite our colleague from MSc.
Thank you, Mr. Ishraq. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Ibrahim Haitham from the Maldives Stock Exchange.
Hello, my name is Haisham. I am the lead software developer of Maldives Stock Exchange. First of all, I would like to thank the executive management of Maldives Stock Exchange and my Maldives Pension Administration Office for giving me this opportunity to bring an exciting new development, the private market. But before I go into details of the private market, the development we are about to bring to you, I will be talking a little bit about what we have been doing at Maldives Stock Exchange and Maldives Securities Depository. We do list companies and its securities. We do the depository company. It is the clearing of settlements, and we also operate the secondary market where individuals trade, buy and sell securities. And we also operate the central securities depository. But these are basic things everybody know about Maldives Stock Exchange. But did you know that we also develop softwares? I'm very proud to stand here and actually say that a huge part of our business is run on softwares developed by our own teams. Notable examples include form processing softwares such as, for example, Digiform. Digiform is a digital form processing application, and Fahivot we have successfully used in past annual general meetings of our listed companies with electronic voting feature. And most of you guys might already know about Infinity. Infinity was developed by our teams for the sole purpose of subscription of IPOs. You could be at anywhere in Maldives, at any island, the Addu city or the northernmost island in the Maldives. You can subscribe to any ongoing IPO at any time. Well, we are about to bring you a similar development. Private market. Well, our colleague Ishraq just gave you a very detailed explanation of the framework. But before I go into details of the development we are about to bring to you, I would like to talk about a challenge we have all been talking about on this platform, on this forum. The fact that our nation is very dispersed, our islands are scattered, people are literally everywhere, and access to facilities is difficult, especially financial facilities. The further away we go from capital Male, the more difficult it is to access to facilities. But our country's population, compared to our neighboring countries, is very tech-savvy. Even our grandparents own mobile phones. We are going to take advantage of that. Vienna. What is Vienna? It's actually an Arabic word. It has a meaning of something along the lines of growth from seed. We are bringing you an online application you can access from your browsers, your mobile phone, for small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, for you to grow your business in. We are going to bridge the gap between investors and people who need funds, borrowers. So who's on the platform? Issuers and investors. Issuers is another term we are using for borrowers, companies who need funding. Anybody can be an issuer. You can, if you need to expand your business, if you need to run a project, you can register yourself on the platform as an issuer. And who are the investors? Investors can be individuals, companies, institutions. And the issuers and investors on the platform are accredited by CMDA, approved, credible people. We are going to bring issuers and investors together. How do we register? How do we get on the platform? It's very easy, online registration. Everything is done electronically, no physical form processing, no more going to multiple institutions with the same set of documents. So, as a company, let's say I want to register on the platform as an issuer. I want to raise funds. I do not have to immediately go live, come up with a bond, immediately open the bond for subscriptions. I can test the market. I have the opportunity to check the market appetite. I can create a bond. I can open the bond for commitments so that the investors can show their expression of interest. If I'm satisfied with the results, I can go ahead and open the offer for subscription. If I'm not, I can request for withdrawal. And once I decide that I'll go ahead and open the offer for subscription and start collecting, investors can start subscribing to the offer. Investors can start paying. And the subscription is also very easy. Just a click of a button, subscription button, and then pay. You are done. So what happens now? Let's say I'm an investor, I just subscribed to, I just paid for 10 bonds from a company, which I think I should trust. I want to know what's going to happen to my investment. As per regulatory requirements, we are implementing a special feature for issuers, an easy way for issuers to report back. Issuers can do their regular, monthly, semi-annually, or quarterly reports, disseminate it to their investors. So as an issuer, you might be thinking, hey, I don't want to show all of my financials to everybody on the platform. Not everybody can see your reports, only your investors and the regulator will be able to see your reports. And there's so much more you can take away from the platform. We are talking about data. We have been talking about data previously during our previous presentations. The platform has been designed in such a way that it collects data automatically all by itself. And the data is readily available for all members of the platform. As in, all members of the platform will be able to see how many people are on the platform, how much other people are making on the platform, how much funds are raising on the platforms, and the data that will be shown to you will be personalized. Especially for the investors, you'll be able to see how many sectors you have been investing. You can diversify your investment portfolio. So there's payment involved. Security is a concerning thing these days, especially on the online platform. We have thought about it. We have tested the platform. We have developed a completely new, modern security module just for the platform, and the platform is going to be very secure. We can assure you that. So that was platform overall. If you are providing legal advisory services or financial advisory services, or an insurance company, for instance, we are openly calling out to you to partner with us. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mrs. Faisal and Haitham. The main sponsor for the Maldives Finance Forum 2019 is Maldives Islamic Bank. We dedicate this segment to the main sponsor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honored guests, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be able to address this forum. I would like to thank the Maldives Pension Administration Office for giving us this opportunity to be part of this event. Looking back at the experts, looking back at the knowledge that was shared here today, we are very privileged that we are the main sponsor of this very, very successful forum. Thank you once again. Maldives Islamic Bank began its journey as a very small bank, trying to make a difference in this 100% Muslim community. Despite skepticism from many, we have been in the forefront of paving the way to a now flourishing Islamic banking and finance industry within this nation's economy. This is witnessed by the fact that today there are several Islamic finance companies, and there is even our competitor has decided to open an Islamic window. I believe that the future for Islamic financing in this nation is growing, will grow, and will prosper. It is not a secret that the development to sustainable economic development is the expansion of middle class. A GDP growth or a boost in GDP that is in alignment with a similar growth in middle class is what makes a difference. And for that, it is not a secret that growth of SMEs and strength of SMEs is the crucial factor. We at Islamic Bank firmly believe that developing SMEs and helping small businesses to grow is the biggest thing that we can do for the development of this nation. Islamic banking and finance is based on the concept of inclusive growth. Inclusive growth that enables parties to reap benefit of trade in an equitable manner, with concepts such as shared risk, exclusion of interest, and most significantly, compounded interest. We are a partner for our business partners. We make sure that your success is what fuels our success. So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to be a partner in business with us. Inshallah, you will not regret such a decision. Maldives Islamic Bank is now poised on the precipice of attaining greater heights. Inshallah, soon we will expedite plans to expand our physical presence as well as stakeholder involvement. I am confident that most of you are already aware of our recent communiques in respect to agreements established between our shareholders. With these milestones achieved, our next phase of development now on the verge of becoming a reality. Our journey, while strenuous, have been rewarding. We are the second widest bank in the Maldives, with an intent to make our presence felt for the entire population. Our development in digital banking is the best of its class. And we are working hard towards bringing in more innovations into the market that would actually facilitate access to finance. This is a very, very core component of our mission, making sure that the entire population is able to access finance and do trade in an equitable way that actually helps them grow, that helps them become prosperous. I hope you are enjoying today's forum. I have had the opportunity to speak with some of you on a one-to-one basis during the sessions and breaks. I look forward to be able to speak to more of you as we go forward. Before I conclude these remarks, we have prepared a short video presentation that takes you through our journey very briefly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Maldives Islamic Bank opens its door as the first and only full-fledged Sharia-compliant bank in the Maldives on the 7th of March 2000. MIB was launched on the backdrop of the 2000 CD, and the government of Maldives took the bold step of investing in the hopes of Maldivians. We are now present in all major population centers with 6 branches across the nation and more than 85,000 customers banking with us. The bank has innovated rapidly by introducing mobile banking and internet banking platforms. In line of the enormous trust placed on it, the bank has worked diligently to achieve several milestones during its young life. During this short period, Maldives Islamic Bank has created more than 200 jobs. Addressing the most important social issue, MIB has stepped in the forefront in financing the development of over 1,000 housing units. In supporting the livelihood of the common people, Maldives Islamic Bank has financed close to 100 fishing, cargo, and passenger vessels. Partnership of the development of the nation, MIB has funded over 77 generator sets to enhance the power grid. bank has supported the expansion of the national airline and the establishment of the bus transport network in the greater Malé area. MIB is the first bank to pilot financing of solar panels for households. We are partnering with Addo City Council to achieve their aspiration of carbon neutral status. With this and many more accomplishments under our belt, we stand on the verge of achieving greater heights as we embark on a new phase of vigor and growth. Inshallah, we look forward for more success in the future. Thank you for being with the Maldives Islamic Bank. We look forward to partnering with you for greater success.
Thank you, Mr. Hussein Alim Shakur. Once again, I would like to remind all the participants to send us your feedback on our mobile app. To send feedback, please go to Events and to the Finance Forum 2019, and then please send us your feedback. Next is a panel discussion on approaches to SME and entrepreneurship financing by our distinguished panel of experts comprising of the private sector, public sector, and the regional expert. May I call upon the distinguished panelists to take their places on stage. Ms. Mariam Wissam, Registrar of Companies. Mr. Ahmad Zainad, Managing Director of SME Development Finance Corporation. Mr. Vajira Kolatilaka, Chief Executive Officer of NDB Investment Banking Cluster. Mr. Aushan Latif, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Maldives Stock Exchange Company Private Limited and Maldives Securities Depositories Company Private Limited. Alustaz Mohammad Fizan, Managing Partner of Fizan and Partners LLP. The discussion will be moderated by Ms. Amnat Irtiasha of Pension Office.
If we are ready to start, I would like to start by welcoming our panelists and thank you for being with us. As mentioned by our colleague, we have a very distinguished and diverse panel here with us today. Mr. Zainat, the MD of the newly established SME Bank, and Ms. Wissam, who has done a lot of work related to government policies in the SME sector, and Mr. Aushan, the CEO of MSC, and Mr. Fizan, who is a very prominent lawyer, and Mr. Vajira, who is the chairman of the Colombo Stock Exchange, and who has provided lots of consultancy in a number of occasions in Maldives. We have seen a very variety of presentations today regarding SMEs, and as the final event or the segment of today's event, we would like to actually put everything together and have a dialogue towards finding a solution for what was discussed. To do this, Pension Office actually commissioned a survey so that we can base our questions on what we found from our survey. The survey was targeted for registered employers in the pension scheme who have less than 100 employees as per the classification in the SME law. And the questions in the survey, we categorized it into 3 key areas: the general awareness of the SME framework, and the operating and financing diagnostics of businesses, and their views on the banking system. I think we have talked today a lot about identifying issues that SMEs find as challenges for them. I think this is another data that will add to it. And the finding of our survey is that despite having a credit guarantee scheme, 52% of the businesses were unaware of this scheme. And also we found that 69% of our survey participants were not aware of a specific SME law in our country. And also that they get incentives under this law. So my first question is to Ms. Wissam. What can be done to increase awareness about SME support systems throughout the Maldives?
Thank you. I think generally there's a problem with the language we speak when it comes to SMEs. All stakeholders, including government as well as the private sector, should start speaking in a universal language. One of those examples is, I have mentioned to you in my presentation, when we refer to a micro enterprise, how many of you are aware of the parameters that we consider? I'm sure that even half of the people in this hall will not necessarily be very well versed with the classification methodology that we apply. So I think these are the issues that we have to tackle. We have to start speaking in a universal language, because only all the key stakeholders are aware as to what we mean by MSMEs and what strategies we are targeting them, what are those strategies that we are using for the purpose of nurturing these SMEs. Then only we'll be able to communicate it to the actual entrepreneurs or the startups. So I think there's a communication gap at the moment, and this is something both the government as well as the private sector has to tackle at this point in time. And apart from that, not only the credit guarantee scheme or the SME legislation, I think all of you will be aware from the presentation given by Ms. Lamia as well as Mr. Zeenath. Generally, there is a misconception as to what sort of assistance should a startup or a micro, small, medium enterprise should look at. So we are not handing in funds, I would say. You have to come up, you have to do your homework. The micro enterprises, small, medium enterprises, they have to do their homework and then approach various support infrastructure that is available through the government as well as the private sector. And even when it comes to banking, I think in Mr. Wajira's presentation, he has rightfully mentioned that bankers, they won't necessarily come up with venture capital funds as well as private equity funds. You have to seek alternate investment service providers to come up with these products. Similarly, you can't be looking at, let's say, Mr. Zina and then expecting him to come up with a private equity fund tomorrow. Maybe he would in the long term, I don't know, maybe depending on his plan. But what I'm trying to say is that where you go, what you are asking from the government, what you are asking from the private sector, it has to be reasonable. So coming back to your question, one of those things that we have to do as policymakers as well as the key stakeholders, we have to start speaking in a universal language, I would say. And then only we'll be able to explain to the island communities, to all potential entrepreneurs, like those who did their pitch as well as explained their ventures today, what exactly is it the support that we can provide. So right now I think there's a gap in our communication, and this is something we have to rectify before expecting our target audience to understand what we are speaking. So for awareness, once this basic requirement is ticked off, I think we'll be good to go. And of course, we will have to use more innovative ways to approach to our target audience. We should not be expecting every single entrepreneur to walk to a specific kiosk or office and seek information. Today, everything is done through our mobile phones as well as other web applications. So we should be able to come up with innovative ways to approach to our target audience. So I think these are the key things that we have to think of, and also, of course, rectify when we move forward from where we are today. Thank you.
Just because you talked about collaboration, do you think it's an issue with collaborating with the government institutions? If so, what can be done to rectify that? Who do you want to collaborate with in that sense?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to pick up a specific institution and say I want to collaborate with this particular institution, but I think generally we have to, even when it comes to government, one of those classic examples is the definitions that we use for auditors, the classifications that we use for SMEs. Inland Revenue Authority and Ministry of Economic Development, we have different approaches to this, including Auditor General's Office. And I think apart from that, even when it comes to how should an entrepreneur, let's say you want to take a specific sample to a laboratory and you don't necessarily have your business registration in place, they might require you to come up with a permit. You can't have a permit in the absence of a business registration. That's how the system works. So what I'm trying to say is that because these bottlenecks are there, this is just an example, right? Because these bottlenecks are there, because we don't, across the border, even amongst the government agencies and various service providers, because we don't speak a universal language, the person or the individual who is who has to face the consequences is the small scale entrepreneur. And that's what I mentioned in my presentation too. Why do we necessarily need to continuously review our processes, look into mechanisms by which we could create enabling environment for SMEs, is because it's a dynamic environment. Today's technology, today's approach is obsolete tomorrow. So we have to be proactive as a government, and of course we have to partner with the private sector, and it's not the duty or the responsibility of a one single agency or a one single institution, but this has to be a collaborative approach that we take. And of course I would like to welcome all the stakeholders who are in this hall to partner with us, not a specific institution per se. Thank you.
Thank you. My second question will be based on, again, the survey results. The finding from our survey shows that the biggest challenge for setting up a business in our country is difficulty in access to finance. I think you mentioned that in your presentation as well. It was ranked the third one, I guess. But according to our survey, our participants have ranked this the number one. And 51% of the survey participants ranked this as the biggest challenge for early wind-up as well, the main reason for early wind-ups. So I would like to ask this question to Mr. Zeenath. How does the government institutions such as SME Bank hope to overcome this barrier? And how do you think the cost of borrowing will evolve in the long term? Do you see it coming down?
Thank you. SME Development Finance Corporation was formed to ease finance for the SME sector. We would like to, there are issues that makes it difficult for SMEs to raise financing through commercial banks. For instance, the collateral requirement, high interest rate, and difficulty in verification of income. So there are issues which I have highlighted earlier. So what we want to do is give a solution to SMEs in raising finance. We would like to have different targeted facilities that will enable SMEs to grow their current business and even fund their new startups. In addition to that, as I have highlighted earlier, that we have priority sectors and priority groups as well. In financing startups, it doesn't mean we will fund every application we receive. We will evaluate their cases and validate their assumptions and see whether this is something taking the risk. We are risking our taxpayers' money, and we would like to make this institution sustainable. So we will not hand out money. We will validate the cases. We will evaluate the proposals, and we will then provide finance. And on the last question about the interest rate, we have reduced the interest rates to help the SMEs to flourish. We want to give them a breathing space. So in my view, I think it should be the market forces that decide the interest rate in Maldives. And for now, it's 10 to 11%. I think the challenge here is that we don't have enough avenues to get finance. We don't have other options other than banking sector to raise finance. If we have options, I think lesser and lesser people will be dependent on the banks to get their loans. in that way, I think in the long run, I think it will come down once our capital markets develop to that level, and we have more players in the market. I think it will come down.
Because you mentioned that usually banks are the only sources of finance available for SMEs, I would like to ask Mr. Aushan about what the alternative lending forms could be for SMEs.
Thank you, Iru, for the warm introduction at the beginning, and hello, everyone. Firstly, let me say that I was very moved by the young entrepreneurs' speeches today. It was really inspiring. Back to the question. When we talk about the traditional form of financing, what we see today is companies going to banks and securing a loan. So there's obviously a lot of limitations when it comes to it, because you are fitting into someone else's suit. So you apply to a standard loan product, which has standard interest rates, standard term of repayment, standard collateral requirements. So it's not flexible enough. So what we're trying to introduce to the market is a private placement market run through an electronic platform which is called Vienna. Ishraq and Haisham has briefed you on that. I'm not going to go into much detail, but if we were to compare the traditional form and the alternative form of raising capital, the main difference for an issuer or a borrower is that you can tailor make your financing requirement through the platform. So you choose your interest rate, you choose your repayment term, which is 10 or 20 years, you choose whether to go with collateral or not. So you pitch this idea to a pool of investors through the platform. So it is up to the investor to take it up or not. So it is entirely up to them to make a risk assessment and go with your project or not. So what we're trying to create here is an avenue, a more flexible avenue of raising capital. And on the spectrum of the investors' side, if you look at it, for investors, they can pick and choose which projects that they want to invest in. And this is something we've been discussing with the banks as well. So rather than investing, let's say, 70% of a single project, you can put your investments through multiple projects. So you can take the advantage of risk diversification and game of averages. So for instance, if one of your project fails and the rest picks up, so you overall, on an average, on a balance of things, you make a good return. So we are trying to create a more equal opportunity for the players. We are looking for more creativity, for more room for creativity, more people to take part in, people moving away from the traditional form of tourism and agriculture and construction sectors we see every day. We want new people and new sectors to pop up with our new platform. So let's move away from the traditional sense of raising capital to a more modern form of raising capital. Thank you.
The pool of investors that you mentioned will be in the platform. Will it be open to international investors as well to participate?
Yes, definitely. Currently, the CMDA is actually reviewing the rules and regulations, so it will be open for all. So currently what we have is retail investors, which means individuals like you and me, and then institutional investors. So individuals doesn't limit to foreigners as well. So I mean to say it does not limit to locals. It can be open to foreigners. But when it comes to for foreigners to invest in the securities market, the main problem for them is not because of the regulations that is specifically specific to the capital market, but it can be some other form of restrictions that come into play. For instance, when foreigners invest in our market, there's a problem of repatriation of funds. So there's a huge dollar shortage in the country. So why would foreigners invest if they can't reap and take away the benefits back to their countries? So there's a need for a more conducive environment that has to come through more top level, more government level, so that it makes a more enabling environment for different type of investors to take the advantage of the capital market.
Thank you, Aushan. We're talking about providing an enabling environment for it. So I'd like to ask Mr. Fizan, how can the current legal framework be changed to include greater financial inclusivity?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Before actually answering that question, I would just like to highlight on a few comments actually made by my colleagues over here, and also in the speeches as well. Now, one of the things today which has come again and again is financing, challenges to financing for SMEs and so on. And one of the recurring themes today has been that it's very difficult for SMEs especially to get bank funding or bank financing. Now, on that issue, I would just like to highlight that I know there are quite a few banks over here, MIB as the main sponsor, and there are some other banks as well. There's nothing wrong with the traditional banking regime, or when we say traditional, the conventional banks. Conventional banks, when they look at funding any project, they look at three things. Who's the customer, KYC, secondly, the project viability, whether your project is viable, whether it will actually be profitable, whether it can return the capital with some margin. And thirdly, in case of default, whether there's some kind of security for the bank, because they're lending you capital, and giving capital is quite a serious business. So banks actually requiring collateral, there's nothing wrong with it in itself. That's just how the conventional banking system is set up. Yeah. Now, moving on to the challenges faced by SMEs. Yes, it's very true that SMEs have an issue with coming up with collateral, especially things like land and stuff like that. But I think the answer to those questions is not to expect conventional banks to change. They will not change because project finance does depend on collateral. Project finance does depend on charging an interest. Project finance does depend on actually looking at the project viability and so on. Now, if you look at how you can go about that problem, one of the things that you can look at is, for instance, the SME bank. We've talked about that. You can look at the way in which the SME bank can be further strengthened. You can look at ways in which how to prioritize the projects. I think some other speakers have touched on that as well. And basically how, now that it's started, how you can actually improve it. Secondly, if you look at SME banks also, I think we should not entirely depend on just one SME bank. The state or the stakeholders should look at how to actually get more SME lending into the market. For instance, other commercial banks coming up with SME divisions. If I'm not mistaken, BML already has some form of SME lending. So banks with their overheads and everything, rather than a lot of SME banks coming up on their own, established commercial banks, if they come up with, let's say, SME divisions and so on, that takes care of their overheads, stuff like that. So it's a new product to the market. If, for instance, the state can look into how to incentivize existing commercial banks, there's about 6 or 7 over here, into lending more to SMEs. I think the credit guarantee scheme is there. There are some issues. I think Zena has spoken about it as well. But if you can look at ways in which how existing commercial banks can lend more easily to SMEs, take care of the collateral issues. The guarantee itself is a form of collateralization, but more or less the risk is passed from the bank to someone else. You can look at those things. Again, there are other avenues as well which may be applicable for some kind of SME funding. For instance, if your business is dependent on assets, let's say machinery, let's say vessels, stuff like that, there's already leasing finance as well which is available. MFLC has been there for a long, long time. So if you're into, let's say, fisheries, if you need to finance your fishing boat or something like that, there are those leasing finance available as well, which could be explored. Again, those are things which, for instance, the SME development centers, we talked about a bit about that as well. Those kind of avenues could be created where actually these kind of funding gaps can be filled by even leasing finance and so on. We also talked about some of the innovative products by the stock exchange and so on. Crowdfunding, for instance, we talked a bit about that. Again, yes, it has not taken off in Maldives, you don't have the scale, but I think that's something you can explore. And finally, when you talk about equity, Vajira as well has spoken about the importance of equity as well. Now, when you talk about small or medium-sized businesses, one thing you find is that these are not sophisticated, structured sort of investments. So there is a chance that Back on. Oh, yeah. So yeah, for instance, many new startups, like we heard great stories today. I think there were 3 great stories we heard today about the young tech startup over there. We heard about the gluten-free products. There were some great stories. What I'm saying is, I think what we have seen from each of those experiences is that they have tried to get capital. They have tried to approach investors to get equity. When you talk about that, for instance, one thing we have seen from those who have bigger pockets is that they do find these kind of ventures risky. But in some of the investments, what we have seen is that investors are sometimes interested in giving something which we call as convertible debt. Yeah, convertible debt meaning to say that the amount of capital which is given as a debt, because they do take the venture as a risky thing. But if it goes well, they have the option to convert it into equity, or vice versa sometimes. So those kind of things also can be explored to actually broaden the horizon of investments. And lastly, when we've dealt with, let's say, vessels and so on, let's say even in the safari business and so on, I'm not sure whether they will fit into SMEs or not, depends on the level of investments. But one thing we've seen is a lot of, for instance, foreign involvement in the Maldives market. I think you're finding the same things with guest house business as well. Now, irrespective of legal restrictions or prohibitions, they are very active. Foreign funds are quite active. We could look into ways in which those funds can be utilized properly by giving some kind of adequate protection to foreign investors as well. At the same time, those capital reach in Maldivian entrepreneurs. For instance, a lot of safari boats or some guest houses, they get financed or built by foreign investors giving the equity as a loan, if you know what I mean. And there's loan agreements, there's some kind of mortgage agreements as well sometimes, but the legal or regulatory mechanisms are not there to recognize those kind of loans. For instance, if a private person gives a loan to another private person, those kind of loans cannot be, or mortgages cannot be created over it or registered. So I think there are smaller ways in which also you can look at alternative ways of financing. Now, when we talk about the legislative changes and so on, we also talked about the pensions fund. We have been talking about, I think, diversification of the pensions fund for quite some time. I think when I was on the board as well. The pensions fund, quite rightly, is set to invest in the capital markets. And in most developed countries, you will invest about 60–70% of your pensions fund in the capital markets. But in Maldives, I think you will agree, we do have challenges with the capital markets. So again, if you think about what it can be invested in, the laws can be changed to actually allow more investments by the pensions fund, by other institutional investors. And it can actually go to SMEs as well. You just have to find a way to SME bond. I think someone actually mentioned the SME bond as well. So such that the laws can be changed to suit a particular type of capital that can be used for SMEs as well. So there are legislative changes as well, which can be discussed with stakeholders, such that the funds, for instance, from MPAO and so on, can be actually diverted into these kind of products as well. So in short, there could be many things which can be done in addition to the typical project financing from banks, which SMEs, small businesses, startups, and so on can actually utilize. Thank you.
Thank you. I will, Mr. Wajira, would you like to add something to it about alternative financing forms?
I'll be a little controversial on this whole thing, because if you, there was a time, as I said, you go to bank for financing, anything and everything. But that era is slowly moving away, mainly because of, not because the banks are bad, but because of regulations that are coming in. Various regulations after subprime problem that came up, various regulations are there to stop a bank being taking too much a risk. So they brought in a lot of rules for that. And with that, banks cannot give too much of risk and do convertibles, or those days we used to do at NDB when we were working, we used to do convertibles, we used to give equity, we were the venture capitalists also, development bank. So we used to do everything, and World Bank used to support us. So all these things had gone out of our horizon, and we cannot do those. So that is why alternative investment, alternative institutions are coming in, and they name themselves. We are venture capital. We are going to be private equity. We are going to be this. And the risk management, the type of arrangements are totally different. The orientation of the mind is different. So those will have to take place for SME to thrive. I was thinking about this coffee business. Now there's a nice company called Jollibee in Philippines. Jollibee was started like this. But one thing is, entrepreneurs also, before going to bank or before finding financing, they should know what they are doing, and they should think big. SMEs can't be a bakery forever and ever, one bakery in the corner. That won't catch equity. That's for sure. Nobody will give equity to you. You have to use your own funds, get a loan, do the bakery and finish off. But if you have bigger plans, then equity will come to you. You should think big. Jollibee business was started in Philippines, in the corner of Philippines once. Good thing is they know the taste of that area. And now McDonald's has a problem. The Jollibeans is giving fight to them in Hong Kong and other places. So that is thinking big. Then the private equity. Facebook never was. Where did they start? It's in somewhere in Harvard corner of a hostel. Where did the Apple start? In a garage. So, but they thought big, and our entrepreneurs also should be able to think big and think about doing something that can have scale. If you don't have scale, equity cannot, because equity valuations, if you think about equity valuation, there is a thing called growth. If you don't have growth, you can't have equity valuations. You can't get capital gains. So people won't get attracted. So those are the business we have to get. The entrepreneurs should get used to thinking big also. They should have to have some business plan. That is why I said 5-year business plan. How can you ask for a 5-year loan without 5-year business plan? How can you, then are you to blame bank for not doing it? You have to actually blame yourself that I don't have plan for 5 years. I started this one and I don't have. But if you think about what Facebook did, how they thought about it, it took time, and he had a plan to go to this distance. So overall, I think entrepreneurship development is an extremely important aspect in this part of the world, including Sri Lanka, and Indians did it very well. The reason is Indian had a lot of NRIs, that is non-resident Indians, who went to America and got educated, and when the India opened up, they came back. They were the leading venture capitalists in US. Were all Indians. They came back, and that also we have to encourage people to come back from wherever they are and come and start their own business. And if you have venture capital, if you have private equity, ideas are respected, then they will come and start their own businesses. I've been going behind the Sri Lankan finance minister for last 10 years maybe, asking him to start a venture capital firm by banks, by the government. How much of money the government is wasting on various other things. You can start $1 billion venture capital, and with $1 billion venture capital can do wonders. You can, because small businesses need not have sometimes 100,000, 200,000 rupiah may be very good one for them to progress, and they can have gradual investments. So we have to have those government support also, I think, to move forward. But banks, I think time is over for think as blaming banks and requesting banks to be a universal provider of finance. That time is over. Basel IV also we are discussing. I heard somewhere somebody is discussing now. I don't know what Basel's come in later. Every Basel come in, equity is hated by banks. Equity features are hated. So every Basel consider time is over for you to go to banks and think about developing. Banks are perfectly required, but for that portion of loans only. So as I said, if you don't have that equity part, if you try to go from the bank only, it will be malnutrition, and companies will not reach their potential. So the firms that we talked about, IT and coffee, other businesses that came up, they need equity to scale it up and go to a different level.
We have talked about finance and non-finance issues that are in the country relating to SME development. I would like to ask Ms. Wissam, what immediate measures are required to support SMEs, both financial and non-financial support, and what should be the role of the government in the private sector?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Um, and support system, I think one of those things that we have to understand is that the financial products that you find today, the bank based financial products as well as other products offered through the SME Development Finance Corporation, which is of course not a full-fledged bank but a non-bank financial institution. I think it's time for us to test and try alternative investments. So we should be looking at private equity funds. I hope that large-scale enterprises, their surplus funds, they are at least interested to try new ventures in the form of a private equity or a venture capital fund. That's how it usually starts in other parts of the world too. Usually large-scale entrepreneurs, they come together in their investment clubs, they start up private equity funds as well as venture capital funds. And as a result, all these kinds of alternative investment avenues are opened up for micro and small scale entrepreneurs, startups. And of course, once they move up the ladder, they are able to use the capital market as an avenue to expand their investment funds, be it a closed-ended fund or an open-ended fund. So I think that's the path we should be looking at now, and I believe that the government support to the Capital Market Development Authority is very important along these lines. And being a board member of CMDA, I personally have seen the challenges that we faced over the past 11 years. And I believe that when we look at the SME ecosystem, and now when we look at what are those, or when we try to understand what are those missing links in moving forward from where we are today, I believe that capital market development, if we have had given more focus over the past decade or so, we could have been in a better place. But I believe that it's not too late, and of course we should, along with the Maldives Stock Exchange, given the innovative ideas as well as the private market platform that they are inaugurating soon, I think we should try to educate and empower small-scale entrepreneurs to utilize this platform and at least try and understand how far they could go through an alternative means. And having said that, I also believe that the Business Center Corporation, my colleague Lamya, she has a very important role to play, especially in terms of providing advisory services, because I think all of you would agree with me, even if you ask a well-versed entrepreneur who have somewhat managed to survive, let's say, without closing up the business, they usually have the understanding of how the tax system works, what sort of alternative financial options are available for the purpose of expanding their business, and also what other regulatory requirements, compliance requirements are in the pipeline or are to be followed by the respective business entity. Because Maldivians, I don't know whether I should be saying this, but Maldivians have the tendency to seek consultancy services. So you always make it someone, you do the exciting part as an entrepreneur, like for example, say Feni, she likes baking, so she does the baking, but when it comes to coming up with an idea as to how she will sustain and expand her business ability, she would be more inclined to get a consultancy through a advisor or a technical person who would be able to tell her how to get things done. But then again, it comes with a price, isn't it? It's a costly thing when you are seeking external services, especially technical services, to scope your business and find out how far you can go in terms of expanding your business. So I believe that for entrepreneurs, for startups, that system has to be created through the government and of course in partnership with the private sector. And I think this is where we talk about accelerator programs, incubation facilities, and also one-stop services, so that the cost of doing business, as well as those people who do not necessarily have a space to start up their business venture, they have at least some sort of a support system which is enabled through the government to make their business idea a viable business concept. So I think that's what we need at this point in time. Of course, alternative investment vehicles and the support system which comes in the form of consultancy services which is enabled through a government institution. I think the most appropriate institution would be the Business Center Corporation to provide that service, of course in collaboration with the SME Finance Development Corporation, and of course to entrepreneurs who are seeking or who are trying to understand how much scope they have in their business in order to move forward. So I think that's what we should be doing. Yeah, thank you.
I would like the audience to participate in the panel as well. So if you have any questions, you can send the questions via our chat. And if not, you could just signal us and we will. The floor is open for your questions. We have answered all the questions, I think.
My name is Valida. Actually, I'm working in Maldives Islamic Bank. In today's forum, we have been talking about development for SMEs and for small business entrepreneurs, micro businesses. And what I realized was that when you look at global market, Islamic finance is one of the best approach to promote SME and microfinancing. So when the government set up a SME Development Finance Corporation, what is your plans for Islamic finance? Because at current, we don't see any Islamic finance in the microfinancing sector or in SME development sector. So what is the future for Islamic finance in this sector? What are your plans?
Thank you for your question. I think that's a very valid and good question. When you think about SME finance, I think the risk is high, and with Islamic finance, I think risk can be minimized, and we have plans to offer Sharia compliant products in the future, but we are working on it. But as you may know, it requires the license and the having Sharia compliant mechanism, Sharia boards. It takes some time to develop these things. So we are working on it, but definitely we'll come up with Sharia compliant products in the future. Thank you.
Add one very good idea. Sharia is compliant instruments are very good for SME sector because it's just like preferential features are there. Brilliant. But other side is what you have to be worried about. The investors should know what they are doing. Sharia rule is that if you fail in that project, if you don't get profits to pay this loan, you are not going to pay back. So investors should also understand that that's the feature. If you don't understand, I found it in Bangladesh, when their things are going well, they are very happy because they are giving good return. But on the other hand, when things go bad, they forget about Sharia aspect of it. They go to fixed income aspect of it. So that can't be, because then you are having a dissatisfied customer. So you have to be very sure that the parties that are coming in understand that this is Sharia. Then superb micro, there are securitizations, infrastructure financing, lot of things can be done through that one, because that features are extremely valuable because it replaces equity with the loan. It has, we call it, I don't think it's even right to call it a loan, but Sharia compliant means it has all the equity features. So it brings in that stability to the company, which is extremely good, but everybody should understand what they are doing. If they don't, you will have a very, very dissatisfied customers with you, because when you don't pay their hard-earned money, then they will have a problem with you.
Yeah, sorry. So I actually forgot to mention that the private placement market that we are promoting today, it will allow you to, like I said, you're making your own fit of an instrument that you're offering to a bunch of investors. So that means you can either go conventional, But if you don't want interest component in your debt instrument, you can go for Islamic products like sukuk and offer it to the investors. And those who have that particular interest to invest in a Islamic security, they can go for it. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have another question.
Okay. Yeah. I have three questions, in fact. My first question to SF, is that SDFC? All right. Is Managing Director. My question is, do you have enough resources to meet the requirements of startups and SMEs as of now? My second question is to our Registrar of Companies. What will your ministry do to support startups during its incubation period or until it makes a profit? And my third question is to Mr. Vijayara. You mentioned that we have to open the whole market in the Maldives to foreign investment. Am I right? We have certain restrictions as of now because foreigners cannot invest or take a stake in the retail trade or small-scale industries such as fisheries, etc. Are you suggesting that we open up and change the law? Thank you.
We should start with the first question, I think, Mr. Zeenad.
In answering the question, I think I have to give you some example as well. So, last year, the government announced for the Get Set scheme and the SME loan scheme. They received more than 1,000 applications. So, I think, in short, the SDFC alone cannot do this. I think the Fizan's idea is very right. We need other banks and other financial institutions to chip in and do their part as well. There needs to be proper SME development wings or divisions in their banks and have their proper products. Also, I think from the survey done by the pension office that not many people know about the credit guarantee schemes. All the banks except HSBC has a MOU with the MMA and they can guarantee up to 1 million. So it's an avenue for getting SME finance through their existing bank. I mean, if you have a relationship with MIB, they can approach MIB and get MMA guarantees, financing from MMA guarantee scheme. So I think other banks and financial institutions need to chip in to provide a better financing options for SMEs. Thank you.
As for what we could possibly do in order to come up with more incubation facilities and accelerator programs and other support systems, I think we have to understand that number one, we run within limited resources as the government, especially the Ministry of Economic Development with our growing mandate, I would say. The approach that we have taken so far is empower certain state institutions to provide solutions, and that's exactly what we have done through the STFC as well as BCC. And as you have seen in this morning's presentation by Ms. Lamia, now the idea is to empower BCC in such a way that BCC will have functional, full-fledged officers in various parts, various regions in Maldives, so that we will be able to increase our outreach, especially in terms of providing information about various financial products, as well as even how to start a business and how to tackle their challenges. All these things will be taught in some manner through the training programs. Also, workshops and networking programs will also be structured and enabled through the Business Center Corporation most likely in 7 regions, right? And apart from that, what the government will do in the future is provide access to services through all the island officers. I think I think most of you will be aware, over the past few years we have initiated a project where we have enabled more than 20 islands, island councils as well as city councils in all those islands where there is a population above 2,000 people, to provide the basic business registration services, including approving a business name, registering a business entity, and the subsequent permits and licenses as well as business name registrations, while the citizens are there in their islands rather than coming to the headquarters of MED. So I think something that we will do in order to increase service accessibility is enable all the islands to provide these services, so long as they have access to the government electronic letter management system, as well as so long as they have economic affairs officers in their island offices. So I think that would be a stepping stone when it comes to ensuring that although we are not able to set up an incubation facility in each region, we at least provide the basics. And what we hope to do in the future is use technology. We will be conducting training programs through video conferencing facilities, something that we did recently try in our business convention. Unfortunately, due to weather, due to bad weather, we were not able to fully test it, but this is an avenue that we want to explore, because I don't know, how many of you, but I think most of the banks, financial institutions, and mostly service providers, they would have the experience that traveling to these islands and trying to get together everyone for a meeting or for a workshop is not easy, because they do also, a lot of entrepreneurs in the islands, they have a full-time job, and at the same time they are trying to explore their venture and trying to find out how far they could go with their investment. So I think it's important to fit into that culture and create the most appropriate, deliver our programs through the most appropriate medium. And to do that, like I said earlier, we don't believe that incubation facilities in all the islands is something that we could possibly do, but then of course we could cluster up and try to come up with a better solution. So these are the, we will be advocating these things along these lines, and like I said earlier, not through the government institutions, not through the ministries, because I'm sure that all of you will agree that a ministry would not have this capacity. This is private sector expertise, private sector experience, which is required to tackle a private sector problem. So for this purpose, like I said earlier, we'll be utilizing the government institutions formed specifically to address these issues, such as the Business Center Corporation. I hope that I answered your question. Thank you. Yeah. Right?
Just
Option, because we're running out of time, so Mr. Wajir.
question is that resource requirements in a SME oriented financial institution or private equity or venture capital is totally different to a bank, because for example corporate banking you need one person maybe handling 30-40 clients, but when it comes to SME type, or which I was headed one in Sampath Bank, or private equity, people like to come to you, meet you, discuss with you their problems, spend time with you. Sometimes they want just to say hi to you, but the productive, you have to spend a lot of time with them. So that allocation has to be done. I don't think you can do hundreds of files like in a normal bank. The whole more you get involved with the business, more resources you require. The quality of resources is also different, and also the type of clients you can handle, numbers are coming down drastically because of time you have to spend with them to build them up, talk to about their problems, and just have a joint partnership type of arrangement is a difficult thing. But the question you asked, the other one, yes, many countries have limitations, but governments also should think about whether giving away 10% or 20% of a fisheries business is it going to hurt? Because according to many companies acts, you can't do any with small scale industries, you can't, foreigners won't come there unless you pull it up to a private equity fund, or and they do it. Otherwise foreigner won't come for SME, but you have to bring it to up to a level, and then bring it up to a certain level, and then the foreigners will come. That may be that not the real foreigners you're talking about. That may be some money coming from somewhere. Yeah, that's there are a lot of Switzerland funds coming like that. Those are a little different, but these are again Sri Lankans may be coming from that way. Some money they have kept there, but real foreign portfolio managers will come for that was what I was mentioning. For them to come in, you have to reach a certain scale. But there are small funds that may come for decent sized companies. But the control, many countries have got their controls on certain sectors of strategically important. For example, banks may not be giving more than 10% to one customer, one investor. In Sri Lanka also, more than 40% cannot be held by foreigners in a mining company. So because mining is it belongs to the country, so they don't like 100% being owned by in India. A lot of businesses they had 40% threshold. So you can have threshold also, but you have to be considerate on the other side. What if India also 25% insurance had 25%, now they have gone up to 49%. So slowly they are going, they are not giving control, but slowly they will, I'm sure, go. China had a lot of controls on, can't go beyond this for foreigners. So your country also, Maldives can also have similar arrangements.
I think we should go to the final question. Yeah. Oh, just one more question. He would like to add something. So.
Our registrar of companies, in fact, mentioned in her presentation that there are a lot of illegal workers in the Maldives. And what are you going to do about it to solve this problem?
Okay, now I have to look for my colleague who is the in charge of labor section who was here earlier, but I just can't spot her. But anyway, yes, the ministry is currently collecting data from all the islands, all the inhabited islands, trying to understand the situation. And unfortunately, I don't have a very direct answer for your question, but what we will do is we will come up with a strategy and we will hopefully publish it in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should make the next one really short. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Afra. My question is for Wissam. Actually, I tried to highlight this in a simple manner in the presentation, but one of the challenges we as local businesses face is the opportunities that we lack of opportunities in the market. So for example, if you look, I can only give the example, the best example from my industry. For example, if you look at Male and airport and other, maybe in Hulumale also, if you look at all these